stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we have Trustee Jeup, Dr. Bishop, our Deputy Superintendent. I'm Trustee St. John. This is Dr. Tuttle, our Superintendent. Trustee Hall will be a late arrival at this point, but she did say she was coming. So just to kind of set expectations for what the policy committee is, I wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page. There we go. I wanted to call that a late arrival. So this is Trustee Hall. And so I wanted to set some expectations about what the policy committee is doing. And the meetings of this committee are to draft policies that would then be voted on by the full board. So we're discussing and kind of workshopping the actual policies and what language would be best. That's why we have administrators here to help us understand what language is going to help our staff get done what we need them to get done. But the actual policies will be voted upon by the board if we choose to bring it forward to them, or if any single trustee wants to bring a policy to the board, that can still happen, even without going through the policy committee. It's just better to have the time here to go through the draft rather than spending time among 7 people during the recorded board sessions discussing the language. So without further ado, are there any concerns about the agenda? Since we are a committee, we're not making any actual votes, but are there concerns? Is everybody good with the agenda? Okay. So first we'll have Dr. Bishop give us an update on staff feedback regarding the parental rights policy that Trustee Jeup proposed at the last meeting.
Absolutely, and just for anybody who's in the audience right there, anything that we'll be talking about this evening will be right there on that first table, so feel free to grab the agenda of the other documents. So remember at our last policy meeting, I was charged with going and speaking to our counselors, social workers, mental health staff around the overall policy. Because the policy, originally when we had the policy 3.26, there were 1 or 2 sentences that we had took out because that language was then taken back by legislation. So at that point in time, I believe it was in 2022 or 23, Mark McInerney, who was our attorney at the time for Clark Hill, had had took the information out of the policy because he felt like it was just kind of one of those things that went along with the guidelines as far as the ones that were being implemented now, since the legislature had kind of rolled back to the things that they were doing in previous years. So we had conversations at the board table and also different places about, at the last meeting around some of the why was really around like abortion and parents having the rights to be able to talk to their children, kind of like around abortion, among other things. So I was charged with going back to our mental health staff and to our team to say like, hey, what do you think about the draft policy? What are some thoughts that you have? What are some things you want me to be to consider? What are some things even you want to take to the legal team that we can have some more conversation about that? So I'm just going to share some of the thoughts. I just want to say first that some of the thoughts I'm summarizing in my own words, so I will apologize to staff if I do get some of these wrong. But I do just want to make sure I have their voices to be here and to be heard. I think one of the things that really kind of hit me in the gut is they would have probably felt respected and appreciated the policy before it went to the public or it went to them. Mm-hmm. I think they feel as if people don't know what they do or what their jobs are, or some of these things that are being talked about or discussed in the policy are actually truly happening. They definitely let me know that there is no talk of abortion that is taking place within their school. They're not having conversations around abortion. And some of the things that were actually in the policy, as far as the parental rights policy, definitely would kind of violate some of their ethical standards as it relates to the roles that they play with students and parents in that confidentiality piece. So they also named that the policy seems like it's out of fear. Fear of what? I don't know, but they feel like as professionals, they are collaborating with parents on an everyday basis. They are working with multiple different agencies to make sure they're best supporting students, and they kind of just didn't understand the why. They kind of wanted to know more of the why, and they wanted to kind of be built collaboratively with it. One of the things I heard loud and clear is, we don't provide therapy. This is not what we do. We're not providing a therapeutic setting. But Roy, if you had some of these things you were looking to present, and they said, why don't you just come to us and talk to us and really we can work those kind of things out together. So that was like a big ask for them. I think some of it caused like some heartache. I think some of it caused a headache for some people to think, like, okay, how would this change? What would my role look? Do you feel like we're not doing our jobs effectively? Are there some concerns and things like that that are not being directly shared with us that are being brought to any one of us on the Board of Education? some of the things that I just wanted to know, like, okay, Roy, if this is the policy that was once here and the concern is around abortion, why don't we just put the policy back to what it was? We have no problem abiding to the standards that were there. So one thing I did work, and you'll see in front of you today, I did put in red policy 3.26, and it did go back to what it used to be. Right, and I talked to the team, and they didn't have any problem with that because they're not talking about abortion with students.
And just to be clear, our legal counsel did say that it was now an option for us to have this, not that we legally had to take it out.
Correct. We don't have to legally take it out. It's an option for us because as a Board of Education, you can always have rules that are stricter than what is being implemented or being suggested or recommended.
Okay.
So as a Board of Education, you can adopt some things as long as they're not illegal for staff to be able to do. So with this is what we are proposed as administration. Talking to staff, they have no problem with this language because they are not having conversations about abortion with students. And so this is what we are proposing as it relates to 3.26 to go to the Board of Education for more conversation and thought.
Okay, I think this does address what we discussed at the last meeting that seemed to be the main concern, but I'm open to hearing other feedback about that. It seemed like the main concern was changing, was it always 3.26, the compliance section? It seemed like that was the main concern, was that that had been removed, that language had been removed due to advice of our legal counsel. But if staff members are fine with us putting it back in and our legal counsel says that's acceptable, then I don't see a problem with that.
No, that's great. That's great. I mean, it was never about not trusting our counselors. It was just about, it was mistakenly removed. And it protects our teachers, it protects our counselors, it protects our parents. And yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'll relay that message. It's probably what we talked about today, even to, I end up kind of sending an invite after our last meeting to meet with 3 people, and then I think 13 people showed up. So I can tell it was definitely a topic of conversation that was well beyond those 3 people. So I definitely can relay the thoughts that we've had here to our professions that we have working with our kids. And I also just want to thank them. Like, it was true learning for me, having an opportunity to sit down with them. And I probably should do it more often in a more proactive way. But for me, there are some things in which they're doing to support our students that's going far above and beyond I even thought I knew what they were doing. So it's definitely enlightening for me, and I just welcome everybody to have the opportunity to definitely see what they do because it's a tremendous service to our students.
It is. We're very grateful for our counseling staff and all of our teaching staff. It seemed like the original draft would have affected as well. And the new language, or the reinstated language, is any school official, member of the board, or employee of the board can't refer a student for an abortion. So it still affects all staff. But
And more too.
yes, it does. So
or any medical procedure. Is that included in here, or?
I don't see where the medical procedure.
it doesn't say that. It seemed
No.
like the main concern at the last meeting was abortion because that was the policy that it changed.
That was different. All this language is a language that was originally taken out.
Okay.
Put it back
I'm gonna
in.
review it, but yeah.
So I'm comfortable with.
Right, not reviewing this, yeah. See what the other policy is. Do we use that in here, the original?
Well, this is the original.
Oh, right
So
there,
what
okay.
you see in red right here, that's what's actually being put back
That's what that-
from the original that Mark McInerney kind of recommended for us to be able to take out. And then the part that's in black is what we currently have now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so I'm comfortable with putting a review of policy 3.26 on the next full board agenda so that we can, hopefully approve reinstating that language. And that was easy enough. So, unless there's any further comments?
I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Bishop, for taking the time to meet with our staff, and thank you to our staff for doing that, because this caused a lot of, you said it, I think, and hit the nail on the head, heartache and a lot of stress, and I think it was unnecessary. If we're gonna have something that we're gonna be changing that affects our teachers and affects our staff members, we definitely need to talk to them and get their input as well, before we just blanket put something out here that goes far beyond what it was, I think, what the intention was to correct. I think it went to documenting things, and it kind of, it did, I think.
Where did it go to documenting?
It talked about, documentation requirements. There's in bold, making sure that we notified parents every time a student was contacting the staff. And so I think that brings a lot of stress, and I think identifying that and recognizing what a lot of people had to go through to make sure that their voices were heard is important.
I
So I would-
appreciate that you were
yeah.
the liaison there.
Yeah,
So it would not be
appreciate the
appropriate
time.
for us to go to staff and say, what do you think about this? But I think in the future, we need to make sure that these policies, any policy that's directing staff to do anything needs to be reviewed by staff before we even bring it to the committee.
Just to see how it
They
affects them.
appreciate that. I think staff would appreciate that. I think they would see that as like a sign of, respect, collaboration.
We'll make sure to do that. in the future.
Collaborative.
All right, so moving on to the reinstatement procedures for expelled students. I know Dr. Bishop had a few recommendations to add in there just to make it more clear if someone is permanently expelled, what we expect them to do if they, because legally as a public school, we have to allow them to ask to be reinstated. It doesn't mean we have to actually reinstate them, but we have to provide guidelines for that. So making it more clear, and do you want to talk about the specific
Yes.
recommendations you have?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, some of the policies that we actually have a chance to work with as administration, we don't really have a chance to dive into it until something happens. So unfortunately, we did have several situations where expelled students have tried to come back into the district, and based upon the feedback of several of those committees, I'm bringing different things to you today for you to be able to consider. One of the things here in bold is step C, which is a request for reinstatement shall include a formal petition for reinstatement. We found that we did not have that already in our process, so going through several meetings that we've gone through, we feel like that's a great step, because in that petition for reinstatement, there is about what has a child been learning since they have not been in our school district, what supports will they need, what does a transition plan look like, and really getting to know more about the incident, how the student feels now, what the family has been doing, what the child's been doing, so we can make our best educated decision around if this student should be welcomed back to our educational community or not. So the petition for reinstatement, which we have implemented, we just haven't had it formally in here, and we would like to. That way we make sure that it's a normal step within our process.
Right, so under E, we have all the things that the committee considers when on whether to reinstate the student. So C is adding that the formal petition needs to include a lot of these factors, right?
Correct, and it does, but it gives us a little bit more. It gives us more of a narrative.
Mhm.
You know, like, and while we can consider these things, we need to consider them along with the proper information from our families and the
Right,
petition.
giving them the
does
clarity that like
Correct.
you need to write down all of the things under E so that instead of letting the committee guess as to what
Correct.
has been happening. And I
Correct.
think that's very helpful.
The next change that we got based on the feedback we have is that we had a line in here before where it talked about that the parent may be invited, and we wanted to put the word shall. So hold a hearing in which the parent and guardian shall be invited to
Oh, okay.
attend. And I think that's important because, honestly, from a parent perspective, I think it's important for your voice to also be heard throughout the process. Like, we've all made mistakes, and children, sometimes make mistakes. And so to be able to have a family there and try to, of course, if they're not able to come, we would continue the process without them. But we really would like them to be present. That way they can talk to and speak to what have they been doing since they've been out of school, what are some changes that they make, what would it look like if they were in the same situation again. That way they can advocate for their own education, and so can the family.
Great, and they can answer some of the questions that the committee is supposed to consider in case it
Mhm.
didn't.
Sometimes that does come up, like
Yep.
extra questions where we have to take back to families to be able to ask them. So having them in the room to be able to answer them right then will sometimes expedite our decision.
I think this will make the process a little more clear for any families trying to get their student reinstated. Even though obviously it's not a situation we love being in, that we've had to expel students, but we want to give them a fair shot at getting reinstated. So, are there any other concerns about it, any comments?
Only that, was this attached to the agenda and I just didn't see it?
No, it was not attached to that
I
agenda.
know this
Yeah.
was, okay.
Mhm.
I just request that if we could get this before the meeting so we could be a little more productive here, because you're throwing things at us and I haven't really read it,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, I do apologize about that. I think we're working with within some time constraints and also working with the attorney on several other different things. So I'll work to try to get that done faster, but a lot of that happens over the weekend, like Saturday and Sunday with the meeting times and Mr. Cobb.
But it's Tuesday, it's Tuesday night, I could have, even if I had it during the day, I really could have read over a lot of this.
That's great feedback
And
for us.
obviously, you read it over, because you know all
No,
of it.
I
No,
hadn't seen
she
this
didn't
until.
have it either, nobody had it.
Okay,
I had been
I-
asking Dr. Bishop, and he told me he needed to make sure that legal counsel had seen every aspect of it, because it is something that we're legally required to have, is these policies and guidelines. So he made sure that legal counsel cleared it first before giving us any sort of draft, which
Yeah.
I understand, but in the future, I'm sure we'll hopefully
Yeah.
have more central office
I'll do
staff
better
to
in
help
that
you
area.
out.
But yeah, no, I didn't share that with anybody. I did
Okay.
share it with Dr. Tuttle this morning. We got a chance to be able to connect, but other than that, I didn't have a chance to share with anybody.
okay, just suggestion.
No, great feedback.
So we want to be as productive as possible,
For sure.
right?
Absolutely, no, great feedback.
And just to clarify, the only changes are in red.
Only changes are in red. I want to be very clear.
So are there any concerns about those changes being an issue?
I'm going to read them for, talk about at the board table, but yeah. And no, I can see.
Okay, so if we can add, policy number is that, if we can add a review of policy 4.11 to the next board agenda, we can take a look at that, and then the whole board will have plenty of time to look over the draft and make sure that they know.
I do have a question about, I know it's not explicit in here, but when we do, come up with some programs and some guidelines for them, do they follow some of our restorative practices that staff has been trained in and that we try to help our students in conflict resolution?
That's a great question. So when we talk about restorative practice, like we as a school district have been trained, but they might not have access to somebody who may be in the school district to go through that process. So depending on what resources that they supply themselves with when they're outside our school system, it depends on if they were trained. It's called different names and different entities, but if they had someone who was able and willing to go through that restorative process with them, they could have that, but they probably wouldn't have access to,
Right.
Unless they have an IEP. Right, if a student has an IEP, they do have certain services that still are entitled to throughout the school district, but even then, it might not be a restorative model.
Right. When they come back in, is that something?
Oh, yeah,
If
for
you
sure.
said that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood the
No, that's
question.
okay.
Yeah, for sure, when they come back in, it's actually part of our transition process
Okay.
for someone to come back in, because we want to make sure that it's not going to happen again.
Right.
What happened when we get down to the root cause of, what that student did or did not do, and even with that other student that they may have had an interaction with, they're going to be in the same building or in the same school district, and they might see each other. We have to repair that harm.
Right.
So there's not kind of any, feelings towards one another when you're walking down the hallway.
Mhm.
But if I may just for a second.
Sure.
Sometimes in expulsion hearings, depending on the offense, we as a board might agree, hey, if student does X, Y, or Z, community service, for example, you might reduce the expulsion, or a suspension, I should say. But maybe you reduce an expulsion, and those are things that can then be considered again, in addition to all these items in 10. But some of that can include some restorative stuff. So we can talk about that, because I've only gone through one expulsion hearing in my time, which is a little bit different. Another thing that we've looked at is we'd like to be able to continue to educate those students, because right now they're just where if we had an online opportunity for those kids so they could continue to receive credits, because as Dr. Bishop said, kids make mistakes, and they're going to be part of our society, and we want them to be successful too, but we want to protect the students from harm's way as well that are still in school. So that kind of does both. They can still continue to earn credits, stay on track towards graduation. So there's other things that we're looking at, but those would be specified in the expulsion hearing themselves and then considered, to your point, in addition to those moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to looking at policy 4.04.1, that's intra-district transfers, so within the district. And I just saw this language today, but it looks like I know we had discussed that some elementary and middle school students have been granted transfers in rare cases. So it's not correct to have our policy say that it's never granted. And if we're going to change it to allow it at every level, still on rare occasions, under transfers within the district, can you explain to me, is this all one policy, or is this a policy and an 8G?
Yeah, the part I have for you, 4.04.1, that's going to be our policy. The one underneath is going to be the administrative guideline.
So for the administrative guideline, it says, on rare occasions, a transfer to the others, high school. So do we want to just eliminate high, since we're not only doing that anymore?
We can do
Another
that. Yeah,
school.
the thought was that in both of the policies, it talked about just there were no transfers for elementary and middle schools.
Mm-hmm.
And we're finding that there are some situations where a transfer or even placement is best.
Mhm.
And so we just want to have a little bit more latitude to be able to say, okay, if this is something we feel like is a need based upon student safety or whatever it might be, that we want to be able to do that instead of not say that we're not going with the policy. So yeah, we have no problem with changing where it says other high schools to all levels. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, other high school may be permitted, and then at the last one, the following will not serve as a consideration or basis for a school transfers, eliminating high there.
Absolutely.
Just to make it clear that this is applying to, the administrative guideline, I assume, is applying to all requests for any school transfer, not just high school transfers.
Yes, yeah, but I do want to also look at it because there's other things underneath the AG, so I only brought to you like what we were looking to change today, so let me look at the other things.
Make sure they don't
underneath
only
that,
apply to
make
high
sure they're all
school?
aligned.
That's fair.
Yeah, so let me make sure, because there are some things that when a student at a high school level, when they go through the administrative guideline, some things that we do as far as an appeal hearing and
Okay.
other things that are high school specific. So I'm gonna write that down, but let me have a chance to look at that with our legal team and get back to you on that, but I want to make a note about that.
Right.
To look into.
Okay, so when I saw this on the agenda, I got excited. I thought, okay, this is gonna be great. I had no idea where you were going with this, but this is a good opportunity to at least discuss, why are we opening the schools to anyone? If I wanna drive, I'm a Richard parent, if I wanna drive my child to Defer and there's a spot open, can I do that?
Right.
And I think this wording is a little micromanaging, even just for this, just, on the rare cases. I was, for an example, I had my daughter, one of my kids was in 5th grade. It was just an issue at the school, and it doesn't matter, it was really kind of personal to me. And we left the district, we went away I drove them to Parkway Christian. And went there for a year, came back, and all was well in the world, because then we hit middle school. But it would have been great, I would never have left if I could have just gone, this is back when it was to 5th grade, if I could have just gone over to Mayor, or hey, if there was a school open, I would have just driven them across the district. And I'm just one example of, I know a lot of people at Brownell that have left and gone to U of D. I can name, family after family that have made decisions like that. So why don't we just open it up? There's a good opportunity to.
Were you gonna say something?
Hmm?
Were you gonna say something?
Yes, but I'm gonna let you go first.
So I think I appreciate that feedback about why we want to open it up. I think sometimes that can be problematic. And here's why. It's like we just say you can go anywhere you want. So let's say just take that as an example. You said, was it Mayor, I believe? Or you said?
My example was, I took my kid and went to I just went out to Parkway Christian. I literally drove her an hour away to avoid this situation.
What school were you at?
Richard.
Okay. So let's say you were at Richard. Let's say you didn't want to go to Mayor. And let's say Mayor was capped out.
Well, then you could have offered me, if you had offered me anywhere, name it, Ferry, would have absolutely driven my child there.
Okay. And that may be an opportunity, especially under this policy right here, which is a rare case. It's talking about you were talking about your child was being bullied or being.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what the situation was, it was personal, and that's what we decided to do, but I know lots of families that have made those kind of moves. I mean, if you ask a typical Grosse Pointe family that has, 3 or 4 kids in the district, did they all go straight from kindergarten all the way through? Sometimes something's not working and they tweak it and they throw one child that might be over here, one child's at one of the Catholic schools, and they make different choices based on what's going on with their particular child, right? So if a parent wants to do that, wants to take on the responsibility of driving them, it would keep more people in the district.
So I think that's a larger discussion that is probably worth having with the full board. So you have district of choice, of which we're not, but you could be
Right.
school of choice within the confines of a district.
That's all
But-
I'm talking about, to be clear.
Right, but what and I get what you're saying. I would say, I think this idea is way up in the funnel, like there's lots of things to consider, but I think what Dr. Bishop was saying, we're not gonna overload a class. So your first priority is to your own school. We even actually discussed this. There was one particular class of, I think it was 4th graders, but don't quote me on that was really high in the district where other schools. So we said, could we offer to the parents in that class, hey, you're going to be sitting in a class of 26 where we've got school X that only has 22. Do any of you want to switch. We didn't do that because of the policy. But it's school of choice is that if there is space, and then it could be, and I've seen this done, but again, I'm not giving, you could have a general lottery. So we have 2 spaces in Mayor's 2nd grade, let's say hypothetically, and you have 6 people who apply as a school of choice transfer for whatever reason, and you do, I mean, it's put names in a hat and you draw out 2 names. These are the students who won the lottery for. It does make things, I mean, I will tell you that I can totally see that side. It makes things a little bit more cumbersome for administration too. It becomes kind of a nightmare who's transferring. A lot of districts go to grade level buildings, so, and I'm not suggesting that at all either, so that all 4th grades have equal number of students, or at least close within one. Whereas in our district, you might have a 4th grade, like I said, that's loaded and one sitting at 20. So in those cases, obviously, but I think there's space available. I think we've kind of done that. And that's why we wanted to change the policy a little bit, because we've had parents that have requested, and we've done that probably more lately. We've had a lot of, I will say, private school kids come back that request. And so we've tried to make those adjustments to get them back in the district, to your point. We'd rather have them here. But there'll be a point where you can't go to Mayor, whatever your choice is, because it's kept out. And so then to your point as well, okay, but we do have space in 2nd grade and defer or a different school. Would you be interested in that? So.
And part of this, we also want to have the conversation with the parents as well, kind of figure out the why behind what their child's kind of going through. Because sometimes the situation of things where there are only certain programming in certain schools and they want to be able to leave and that transfer just can't happen. So how do we work with that child and make sure whatever they may be going through at that time can be helped, can be remedied, and that's important to us. So like every situation is not going to be able to allow a transfer. You'll be surprised some of the reasons that we hear somebody wants to be a transfer, and some of them are inappropriate. So every reason is not going to be met with the yes. So like I think we need to make sure that.
What would be, you know, I have a friend that wanted to transfer their kid, another story, they wanted to transfer their kid because they're after school. Like they go home with it, so this is parents picking up a bunch of kids around the district instead of them all being at the same school. Like that just makes sense. And I don't know if we want to micromanage the situation, right? Like that's a good example of the why it really doesn't affect the school, it just affects the family.
I think it depends. I'm just giving you the situation because we're in it every day.
Yeah. Tell me one of yours. Yeah.
You know,
for
we
sure.
kind of see what happens on an everyday scale because we kind of are in the environment. I think it's something like Dr. Tuttle said that we definitely can't consider, but I think there also needs to be some parameters around it because if everybody asks, we're not going to be able to say yes to everybody, especially with us going through the budget reduction process right now. Some of those movements may not necessarily be able to happen because we're not going to open up another section for one student who would like to be the transfer.
No,
So
well,
gotta have
that
those
wouldn't
conversations.
happen, right? So let's just say that would be a permit, right? If there's no open spots. But again, if I want to drive my kid for whatever reason from Richard over to Ferry, what would be the, you know, instead of, I think there's more liability in micromanaging that decision than there is in just saying, okay, there is a spot. There's only 20 kids in that class, and yes.
And parents can really see that now. On our enrollment website, they can see where there are spots, and I just stop them from asking if they still can go, but they still can see that now. But I guess when you talk about the micromanagement, I think we like the opportunity for them to be able to talk. So if you know a family, as of right now, who is having an issue, having a problem, and wants to be able to talk, please have them come, because we've been doing it more than the policy required before in the past, and we want to have an opportunity to do it more. And this is our first step towards it.
Right, should we broaden the whole policy then? So that we
I would say we should not. I like that it says in rare cases, and I know there's been talk about our ideas of neighborhood schools, right? If you start opening borders and start kids moving wherever they want because they don't like this teacher or they don't like that family because the older sisters didn't get along, or who knows what reasons might be legitimate to them but may not be for a community-wide issue. And then you have the issues of siblings. So maybe a 5th grader wants to go to this school, but then there's older siblings, and then, or if it's in an elementary school, it may then limit the opportunity for a family who moves into that community where they would normally go to that school and then it's full. So then you've got that whole triangulation issue happening because somebody decided that their needs were greater than somebody else's just because of their desire that may not be, you know, for safety or security or for what's best for that student because of, say, they need that special education program that's available at that specific school. So I think it opens a whole lot of other issues, and then you start moving you look at the high school issue, I think that's really gonna, if you opened that up to just be open, you would have a lot of other issues between our two high schools that we're trying to bridge the gap and bring some community together. I think you're gonna see
What
a
issues
lot
do you
of
see happening
differences.
if we opened up north and south, per se?
I
That's
think
what
you'd
you're talking
have
about.
a lot of kids from north that wanna go to south and move, and then you could just start moving kids all over for, not good reasons, in my opinion. And I guess that's just my opinion, but I think this is a bigger conversation than
Well, what's
just
the
the
not
five of
good
us.
reason?
So-
I'm not following.
Because they wanna be with their friends, or because they wanna play for that coach on that baseball team, or because they want to.
I'll jump in if you can correct me if I'm wrong on the historical reason here, but our previous transfer policy was more open and flexible and wasn't just in rare cases, like this was before.
Yes, prior to us closing buildings, yes.
And
So very recently, we're talking within the last 4 years, that was the policy.
more than 5 years ago is when the policy
Yeah, like
changed, I
5
believe,
years ago,
because
4 or
the
5 years
Michigan
ago.
Department of Civil Rights said we can't have that policy because it was enforcing segregation. And that it was kind of just happening without intention on the administration's part, but some parents were naturally segregating, and having the policy like written that way was not permissible under law. We can have the policy written this way, or as Dr. Tuttle was pointing out, if we had an actual school choice within the district and had a lottery system that made it fair, that would be another thing that, you know, we could propose down the line if this policy isn't enough. But
Let's go down that road. I think that's a good road to,
if you would
Go
like to
down.
propose that, you know, in
Sure.
following years, we have the intra-district school of choice, feel free to bring that to the whole board. I know President Warren is open to adding things to the resolution, but since this is what administration is requesting we do right now, I think we should, you know, at least get off the books the fact that we don't do elementary and middle school transfers, because we do, and we have been. And I want the public to know that it's not behind the scenes or anything in violation of a policy, but that
okay, so we can, they can, so
So we
so
can,
if I have any people that come to me, and, you know, a lot of people talk, and they want to switch schools, it's more than likely a yes.
That's
Because-
it depends on the
It
reason.
says in rare
Yeah, it-
cases.
yeah,
Okay,
but
but
the
rare
fairly-
cases, so
Likely.
if I'm a private school kid and to lure me back, that's a yes reason, but my need at Richard for whatever my personal reason was to move over to the other area wouldn't, like, where's the fine line then?
this isn't to lure private school students back, it's to make sure that all the students in our district are getting their needs met. So, you know, if there's a bullying situation and they've tried a lot of things to resolve it, the principal's tried to resolve it, all the parents have tried to resolve it, and they've already gone through all those steps, and everyone agrees that it's best for that student to move to a different school, then that's what they'll do. But
For that
it's,
example, that makes sense, sure.
it's about what's best for the student, not just because
For
the
sure
parents
it's
want
best for
to.
the student, which is usually what the parents are advocating for. Like I did, what's best for my child was to literally put her in the car, drive an hour there, pick her up, another hour for me to drive out there, drive back, right? So I was 4 hours in the car right already. And, you know, it worked. And you do what you need to do for your child, and I think a lot of people have their own reasons, and they may match what you agree with, they may not match, so I feel if we open this up a little bit more to not rare occasion, and like you're saying, if there's a private school kid that comes here and wants to go to Ferry and doesn't want to go to their home school, you're allowing that, but then you can't say, you can't allow me to want to go over to Ferry because you don't like my reasoning. Like it really, that's not rare.
I just want to be clear, I didn't just say anything about private school. I think you were
Or you
talking
said
about that.
something about,
I didn't say anything about that.
How about can we say on a case-by-case basis rather than rare?
yeah,
Is that better?
I like that
On
better.
a case by case
Because I think the
basis? Okay.
intent of this was because Dr. Bishop and I said, we're doing this in violation so much of the policy, we don't feel comfortable doing this anymore. So this was our initial start to say, look, we do have, and there's more and more of them for special cases or whatever, but to your point, I think that's something, this is a baby step to getting perhaps to a greater step that requires a lot more discussion, but
Yeah.
maybe on a case-by-case basis.
Sure, yeah, I mean, that's great feedback, we can put that piece in there, case, but that makes the
Yeah.
board feel better about what we're doing.
I'm fine with that language change, because I think rare is subjective. How many students per grade would be rare, I don't know, so.
Yeah, the
case
goal
by
is
case
we want to
basis.
have more flexibility in doing it, because we know for a fact students are coming with some concerns,
Mhm.
and we want to be in the best interest of kids.
And then, as Dr. Tuttle said, it's a larger conversation to do full intra-district school of choice, and.
Yeah, and just like and I'm not saying let's do it right this minute, right? We're only 3 people out of a 7-person board. And here's our chance to I was excited when I saw it on the agenda, because, it's been a discussion in the past. Let's keep the discussion going.
Yeah, I think it's important to have elementary and middle school students also having this opportunity because things happen and sometimes a different environment is better for the kids, so.
For sure.
I'm wondering if there's another phrase in between those two, because case by case to me then seems very much like, I don't know.
Each case will be individually considered by the superintendent.
Right, which it is.
And which.
I think using the word rare is already setting it up for more than likely not, unless there's extenuating circumstances, so maybe something to that.
Well, and I know some cases in the district that we've allowed that, happened a couple of years ago. I won't mention family names, but they should be at one school, they're at another. Don't worry, I'm not gonna mention names, but I saw you shake your head. They're at one school, they're at another, and it's really, the reason is pretty much sports. So we allowed it in one case, just saying. Whether that's something that should go on or not, and I don't know what the background story is, I just know the social story.
Is that you advocating for a case-by-case basis, or is that?
Well, yeah, case by case, and
Okay.
if it makes sense, and if there might be a reason
So
that
maybe we need to dig into more what would be
Case by
acceptable
case.
reasons or not, because.
it's not rare.
Well, they have in the administrative guideline,
A
the
little
following will
beyond.
not serve as a consideration, so, and those are things like, my friends are over there, or,
Legacy of family, or?
yeah, or civil rights
Or
issues that would.
sports.
Well, the
Yeah,
topic
the sports
is
is on
in
there.
that list.
Sports is on?
That's what I thought,
so
like prefer
It
an
wouldn't
athletic
be-
team.
It must have been more to that story if it's not just.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one is being referenced right now, so
Yeah, it
I
does.
don't know which one that one is, but
But there are cases, and they're not necessarily what I would call rare necessarily. So let's at least loosen that up and
For sure,
keep
if
the
rare
conversation
is
going
the
and-
second point, like we said before, the intent and the why was behind
Yeah.
us being able to have more conversation and dialogue with our families, because as of right now, it says no transfers, and we don't want to say no. We want to be able to
Right.
say yes more often. So the intent is good. If the word we need to get somewhere else, we can get somewhere else with it.
Squabble a little bit. I
Well,
just,
Dr. Bishop had already indicated he wants to go through the, A, B, C, D,
Yeah,
or G
yes,
under the administrative guidelines of what's not a consideration for a transfer to make sure that it's not exclusive to secondary schools, or to clarify in those for high schools, this would be a consideration or something like that. So would you like the time and we come back in April to the policy committee with it?
Sure.
Or would you,
Yeah,
do you
let's do
think,
that.
I didn't know how urgent it was since, people
I mean,
probably aren't transferring in April.
No,
They
not
might
so
wait
much.
till the
no.
next.
Yeah, no, not, yeah, we got a
They'll
little
wait
bit
till
of
over the
time.
summer,
I just
probably.
think it's important for us to review it,
Mhm.
because we are letting it happen on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so maybe review some of that language more to make sure that we're all on the same page and
Sure.
really getting that intent, and then bring it back to the April meeting.
Yes.
Okay, so that'll be so we'll have 2 new policies on the March 31st agenda, and then we'll consider policy 4.0, 4.1 again with more clarity at the April policy committee meeting.
Or we can move this piece through, get it to the board table now, and
we
then
haven't seen the piece
bring the
that goes with
discussion
it.
going on, right?
It sounds like Dr. Bishop would like more time for that, that's why I asked it.
Do you want more time for this?
I'll take more
piece?
time.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
And since people usually make their requests for transfers over the summer when they're looking at, I don't know if we want to go back to that school in the fall, or maybe at a semester change, but I don't think April is going to be the month that people are coming and saying,
we're
just one more
experiencing
month,
now. Yeah,
you
We're not
know?
experiencing as much right now. Like, it definitely will be coming up on the horizon for next year.
Yep, I think that's wise. Okay, are there any further concerns about those, what we're moving forward on? So we will now open for public comments, and before, at the last meeting, I was a little informal about the timing and everything, so this time I am gonna have a 3-minute timer. And each speaker will get 3 minutes, but we'll still be informal where you can just, let me know that you wanna talk next and state your name for the record. So do we have anybody who'd like to go first? Oh, go ahead, Ms. Pappas.
Lisa Pappas, West Point City. just regarding the transfer policy, as somebody who's lived here for over 20 years, I personally knew several cases where people pulled their children out because, and this of course predates Dr. Tuttle being here, but they were treated, they felt so badly by the administration for their reasons for wanting to change schools. So I think in an era of declining enrollment, I would be shocked in the land of competition where we have so many different kinds of competition for our students, that we really need to rethink how we're treating our residents. These are the residents. The public schools, we all pay taxes for our kids, whether they go to Liggett, whether they go to St. Paul's, whether they go to whatever school. The people in this community pay taxes for our schools. And if they have an issue that they feel is important, and I know people very well that went through this process and fought really hard, sometimes successfully, to get their child switched to another school for a variety of reasons. But none of it was ever done lightly. And just, you know, if a family has childcare issues, let's say they have a family that lives across town and they want their children to be with their cousins or family or whoever before school, and then come home after school and be with their family, as opposed to, and then maybe the solution is, oh, well, you have kids club. Well, that kids club is not cheap. I used to have to utilize it on Mondays, late start Mondays, because my husband and I had to work for 2 kids, and it was quite a little chunk of cash that I coughed up on Monday morning for late start Mondays. So I think that we have to really think as a business, and that we want to keep every possible student in our district that we can. And it's the way we talk to them, it's the way, and I think with Dr. Tuttle's leadership, that's going to definitely happen. And Dr. Bishop, I think he'll do a great job with that, but I think we really have to rethink how hard we're gonna be about this transfer business. And there's a whole lot of other details, I don't have time, and I understand. I think, there has to be a cap on a time limit for a routine transfer. You cannot let people not looking over the summer. You need to have that filed before June so that classrooms can be set and teachers can be assigned. And I don't want to see a policy where people are going all over the place numerous times, and then we create a situation of trying to staff classrooms and having to move teachers from building to building. Those are the details that, people that aren't in education, don't maybe understand. And I do understand that, and I see it. I work in a district where there is a school choice in district, and we have a lot of kids that are coming and going. And that kind of situation we don't want to see, happening, because it really doesn't serve the students well or the schools. But please consider that we want to keep as many kids in our district as we possibly can.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Go ahead.
First of all, I appreciate the discussion. It was nice watching the process and people illuminating their concerns. I can't speak to other people's concerns. I can speak to my concern. I would be in favor of broader language to allow transfers, because the experience we went through, we moved from McKinley to Mount Vernon, 2 blocks. We were told that our 3rd grader and our 4th grader the next year would have to go to Kirby, and one of them would be in their final year in 5th grade. We appealed that decision. One of them was allowed to stay at Richard, and the other one was told he had to go to Kirby. Then we had to have a sit down with like 7 people, the board, the superintendent, and everyone else, finally to appeal that my oldest would finish his 5th grade year. I didn't seem like a big ask, but to have to go through such an ordeal for such a minor thing, keeping a kid in one building for 1 year extra, allowing the transfer for one child but not the other, it doesn't seem to meet the needs of the parents in the community. And I don't know what other people go through when they move from a house to a house, but we need more space, so that was the easiest, quickest jump we could make from one street to another. So it seems to me that that'd be a terrible thing to let a family know after they've made a major purchase like that, like, oh, by the way, we're going to disrupt your whole child's elementary education experience because you had to move 2 blocks. So, whether it comes to case basis, unique basis, whatever it is, I think that there should be more catering to the individuals in our district without allowing destabilizing efforts to have a mass movement. I would disagree just a little bit in that the people I know that go to North, and again, that's anecdotal, don't have any interest in going to South. Maybe there's an underway that I'm not aware of, but if the concern was that people would be flying from one end of the district to the other, I think that premise probably doesn't have foundation, but I'd like to see data that would support that before that was the reason why we couldn't allow transfers. Thank you.
Yes, can you state your name since I'm taking notes?
Kevin Nugent.
Just wanted to make sure. Any other public comments?
I'm Jenny Sherman. I'm parent hat right now. So the transfer piece for me is just the concern that my kid goes to defer, which is huge. Monteith is huge. So even though a first grade classroom might be fairly open according to whatever standards we have, defer is still really full. So like my only concern about the transfers is the idea that just because the first grade at defer has 25 instead of 27, which is what my kid has, I still don't think, we have to think about, to me, the whole building, the support we have in the building. There's one principal, there's the teachers that are there, so just because the classroom in one grade level appears open does not, to me, make sense to move a kid from Richard, which is this big, to Ferry, which is this big. So that's my only concern, is like, while the classroom might appear open, there's still a lot of kids in that building that one principal is in charge of, and I think we just have to be mindful of that when we're talking about transfers.
Anyone else?
I'm Glenn Hipple from Harper Woods and formerly chair of the music department. So this transfer issue has been part of my life for 25 years because I work on the north and the south end every year. And students would always want to go from one end to the other for one reason or another. And I want to second Ms. Sherman's motion, by the way. I said, that really sounds like it makes a lot of sense. And I worked in all 9 elementary buildings, and I know that there were just small little variances, and it can make a big difference in the building, so I hope you'll carry that forward as well. But I really want to advocate for a broader language for transfers. I really liked the on a case-by-case basis instead of the rare. I was like, that sounds very reasonable. It sounds like the administration is listening. And I know there are a number of programming reasons why people would like to change schools or parts of the district or whatever. And if there is a programming reason, because there's a strong teacher or a strong program, I hope you would really listen to that. And even if you don't grant the transfer, congratulate the teacher on having a program that's drawing people from other parts of the district. Thank you.
Is that all? This brought to mind a couple questions, actually. Do we want to add the phrase taking into account current building capacity for the inter-district transfer? Mm-hmm. Just because I know you do already, but just to say, have that formalized in the language so that parents know, well, we're taking into account current building capacity and you want to go to a building that's already close to capacity. Because I think part of the intent with this is to allow students who are in a class that's already close to the cap to potentially go to a school that is maybe doing a grade level split because they don't have enough students, then try to equalize that in certain cases. So I think that would help clarify it too. And then I believe our current policy, obviously I don't know how many years ago the situation with a fifth student not being allowed to finish their 5th grade year potentially, isn't the current policy that if a student moves or a student's family moves within the district and they have 1 or 2 years left at their current school, they're allowed to complete at that school?
Yes, that's correct. And we have had students who, if they have a situation in which they move and it's best for the student to be to stay, we have allowed them to be able to stay. Okay. So that also is one of the reasons why we need to also have a little more leniency when it comes to the policy. Okay.
So it sounds like we've addressed that in the past couple of years.
Yes, and it is in the policy now as far as the student can't finish out that term there.
Okay, great. Those are all my clarifying questions. I appreciate the public comments that brought up those concerns. So now we're moving on to committee member comments. Trustee Jeup, did you have anything else you wanted to say? Okay, Dr. Bishop?
Yeah, as per the dialogue tonight, I think like we talked about the term rare versus on a case-by-case basis. Like I think that's what's the powerful about this group is when we can talk and collaborate and come up with those wording that everyone, it really appeals to them and gets the why across the finish line. I think it's important. So I appreciate just the dialogue and discussion about that and the future dialogue.
Trustee Hall?
I just wanted to thank our counseling staff again for being here tonight.
Dr. Tuttle?
I'm all set, thank you.
I wanted to thank the public members for being here tonight, whether you made a comment or not. I appreciate the input, and I know some of you have emailed me with concerns about these policies as well, and that's always helpful to get
I
public
did have one
input.
last thing. Yeah, I just want to thank Dr. Bishop for taking all these on, because I know he's worked really hard on this and worked with the attorney, so I do appreciate his leadership.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bishop, especially for navigating the issue with our counselors feeling not respected by having that policy and getting their feedback, and hopefully they understand now that we do respect them and we want to listen to their feedback and adjust the policy accordingly. So I appreciate your leadership on that. And just to clarify, at the March 31st meeting, we will be bringing the finalized draft that we worked on here of policies 3.26 and 4.11 to be voted on by the full board. And because we had more questions and there's a lot of legal concerns with the intra-district transfer policy, policy 4.0, 4.1 will come back to the April policy committee with some more details as far as that, to make sure that we're being fair to everyone and also being clear in our language. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Before sunset.